Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're unpacking a true crime story that is just so baffling, so incredibly layered, you'd think it was pulled straight out of a Hollywood script, but it's entirely, heartbreakingly real. We're looking at the unimaginable life of Clinton Kalu, a man who fought a seemingly impossible battle against the very things he literally spent his life studying.
Okay, let's dive right into this. A consultant criminologist sentenced to death. Just imagine that for a second. Dedicating your entire life, your education, your career to understanding crime, law, and the justice system, only to become a victim of that exact same system. It's a profound, staggering irony. Clinton Kalu knew the law inside and out. He studied the minds of criminals. And yet, through this totally bizarre and terrifying twist of fate, he actually found himself labeled as one of the worst offenders imaginable.
And the cost of that horrific irony? 27. That's 27 agonizing, terrifying years. For nearly 3 decades, Clinton Kalu was locked away for a crime he absolutely did not commit. And, he wasn't just sitting in a regular cell. For a huge chunk of those years, he was actually waiting for the hangman's noose. Imagine waking up every single day knowing you might be executed for someone else's lies. So how does a nightmare like this even begin?
Part 1. The Criminologist on Death Row. To really grasp how shocking this whole thing is, we have to rewind to 1992. Clinton Kalu is this ambitious 29-year-old rising professional from Imo State. He's full of life, highly respected in his community, so his expectation? He was literally just trying to do a good deed. He stepped in to help resolve a simple family dispute over a generating plant and some fluorescent tubes at a compound where his sister got married. Just a regular family squabble, right? Well, the reality was much darker. He was framed for armed robbery and murder by people who basically felt threatened by his success and his intervention. They orchestrated this deadly conspiracy just to take him out of the picture entirely.
Part 2. Framed over land dispute.
So how exactly was this trap sprung? Like, how on earth does a minor property argument escalate into a literal death sentence for an innocent bystander? Let's trace his terrifying descent into the system. In April 1992, he's arrested and taken to the local police station, then eventually moved to Owerri prison. For the next 7 years, he is dragged through this grueling tribunal trial. And here's where it gets incredibly sinister. His accusers realized they needed to guarantee he was put away for good, so they actually added armed robbery to his charges and brought in false witnesses to testify against him. The case eventually moves to a regular court, where the ultimate blow is struck. He's condemned to death. This absolute ordeal wouldn't legally end until April 5, 2019, when he was finally exonerated by the Supreme Court.
Now you might be wondering, where was his legal defense during all of this? Well, as Kalu later put it, his defense lawyer totally messed up the case at the appeal court. After Kalu was transferred to Port Harcourt Maximum Prison, his initial appeal completely failed because of shockingly poor legal representation. He was totally stranded. The system had swallowed him whole, and he was left writing petitions from his cell. And, as he noted, those get you absolutely nowhere if you don't have someone on the outside pushing for them.
Part 3. Surviving the hangman's noose.
What does it actually look like to survive day in and day out for decades inside the Nigerian prison system while waiting to be executed? 200. That is the number of men packed into a single room to sleep, and this brilliantly illustrates the brutal, suffocating overcrowding. Kalu described the prison environment as this deeply harsh place where every single man is desperately trying to outwit the next guy just to survive one more day.
In fact, Kalu shared a quote that paints a devastating reality of life in there. He said, "Once an inmate dies, the next man around will carry the dead person's food and eat." Just let that sink in for a second. It vividly captures the sheer desperation and the tragic loss of humanity inside that facility. A man's death literally just meant an extra ration of food for the starving prisoner next to him. That was the reality he woke up to for 27 years.
And to make matters even worse, Kalu was battling a severe health crisis the whole time. He was diabetic. Because the prison system couldn't adequately care for him, he had to figure out how to feed himself and manage his condition for almost 3 decades. He literally had to sell off his land, his cars, his other properties, everything, just to buy the food he needed to stay alive. When his funds finally ran completely dry, it was actually the church that had to step in to take over his feeding.
Part 4. A PhD behind bars.
But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of letting the darkness of death row totally consume him, Clinton Kalu fought back with his mind. We're moving from this unimaginable tragedy to an awe-inspiring story of human resilience and intellectual triumph.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because his academic achievements while waiting for the hangman are nothing short of phenomenal. First, he earns a diploma in theology, then a bachelor's degree in guidance and counseling. Next up, he secures not one, but 2 master's degrees, one in education management and another in guidance and counseling. And finally, the whole shebang. He reaches the absolute pinnacle of academia, earning a PhD in guidance and counseling. All of this while locked inside a maximum security prison? Absolutely wild.
But he didn't just hoard all this knowledge for himself. No, he organized free educational seminars for both inmates and wardens. Kalu noticed that a lot of the younger folks in the prison were restless, they lacked academic exposure, and were just desperate to succeed by any means necessary. So, using his newly acquired expertise, he put together these seminars to help reform them. And he did it completely for free. Sponsored by the church, he dedicated his own time to healing the very people who were trapped in the system right alongside him.
Part 5. Supreme Court Exoneration. After 27 long years of waiting, of studying, and of surviving, the climax of his journey finally arrives on April 5, 2019. He decides to bypass the lower court failures entirely and takes his case straight to the Supreme Court. They hear his case, they discover the conspiracy, find him completely innocent, and officially discharge and acquit him. At 56 years old, he walks out of Port Hark South Maximum Prison a free man. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profound disconnect between how society views a released prisoner and the actual truth. Society's label is usually this quick, cruel stamp, ex-convict. But Kalu's reality? He is an innocent, wrongfully imprisoned man. The highest court in the land declared he committed no crime. He was just a victim of false witnesses and, as he put it, a gang-up at the highest level.
Kalu fiercely refuses to carry any sort of stigma for a crime he didn't commit. He stated plainly, "Any person that refers to me as an ex-convict, I will look at the person as a fool. I will just ask God to forgive him." It's incredibly powerful, right? Not only does he completely reject the false label, but notice his profound lack of desire for vengeance. Despite losing his mother while he was incarcerated, despite losing his properties, he says he has imbibed Christ and has absolutely zero ill will against the people who orchestrated this entire nightmare. He just leaves their judgment to God.
That staggering capacity for forgiveness is just so deeply moving. Explaining his mindset right upon release, he said, "I feel like a newly born baby. God gave me another chance to experience His greatness again." Despite literally losing half of his life to a concrete cell, his overwhelming feeling wasn't bitterness, it was pure gratitude and inner peace. His cousin even remarked that it was like he'd been called from death back to life.
So the crucial point is this, and I want to leave you with a question to really chew on long after this explainer ends. If a highly educated consultant criminologist, an actual expert in the law and the justice system, can lose 27 years of his life to a false accusation and a rigged trial, how safe is the average citizen? It's a terrifying, provocative thought that forces all of us to critically examine the fragility of our justice system. Thank you so much for joining me to uncover the unbelievable, inspiring story of Dr. Clinton Kalu. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.